Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Right, so this podcast which you're about to see, I introduced Shaykh Ashraf and I said we're going to be talking about mental health. That was the plan. MashaAllah, this unscripted podcast then led us on to one thing, to another thing, to another thing. We only touched on mental health a very little bit. However, alhamdulillah, we cover things like education, things that the ummah needs, leadership, and other really important topics. So inshallah, stay tuned. And if you benefit, inshallah, share this with others. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli wa nusallimu ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. Right, this is the Shaykhology Podcast and we're jamming live, right? We've got Imam Ashraf Dabous here, Imam of Lewisham Masjid. I was hoping to get Imam Shakil on board as well, but inshallah next time we'll get Imam Shakil as well, and then we'll jam as a trio or inshallah even more guests. But my guest here today, alhamdulillah, we have a very interesting discussion which we're going to have around mental health and a few questions in relation to that particular field. But rather than me introduce, inshallah, I wanted to ask the Shaykh directly himself, and we'll get cracking on, and hopefully, inshallah, you'll receive some benefit. So as always, inshallah, make dua, and make sure that, inshallah, this also, you can spread this to other people who may benefit. And without further ado, right, Shaykh Ashraf, hope everything's cool, man. I mean, we haven't even had any sort of formal introduction. I thought I'll save it for this. Yeah, I thought just jump in raw, man. There's no point us, longing things out. I thought let's just jam one time. I mean, so I don't really know much about yourself. I mean, I know a little bits and bobs. That obviously you're a man in Lewisham. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. I mean, I've known of Imam Shakil for a number of years. I've had the privilege of meeting him a couple of times. And he also did a course in a place where I also did a course. Okay, alhamdulillah, he's a lot senior to myself, but alhamdulillah, I've got great respect for him. Mashallah, he's done some great work in Lewisham. So just a little bit about your background. I mean, where you kind of hailing from? I know you said you came today from Milan, so like, where's your upbringing, and tell us a little bit about
that. So my upbringing was in West London.
Yeah.
And moved to East London about 14 years ago now.
Yeah.
I've a graduate of the Islamic University of Medina.
Yep.
And
when was that roughly? When did you graduate?
2017.
Oh, alhamdulillah, so not even too long ago.
No, not too long ago. So I was there for quite some time, and also studied counselling, person-centered approach, and CBT. Graduate from Goldsmiths with a master's in CBT therapy.
Yeah, good. Alhamdulillah. I mean, that's something which I'm really we're gonna have a good discussion about, because I also have studied counselling as well. And I didn't go through to the masters because in our community there's certain reasons why I didn't, but I'm going to come to that in a second, inshallah.
And it's not just myself. There were many brothers have a similar story when it comes to studying, whether in Medina, in Azhar, in Mecca, al-Qura, Darul Uloom. You find many brothers, alhamdulillah. But the point that you mentioned, about parents not wanting their children to study, I think this is a big issue in our community, generally speaking. The issue of lack of concern for education. Yeah,
this is this is a crisis, man.
Yeah, definitely, and it's, I mean, you see materialism and even when it comes to career choices, for example, university choices, things like that, it's always centered around the financial gain that you can acquire.
Definitely,
it's not centered around contribution towards myself or society.
Yeah.
And that's why, for example, you see many Muslims, they go into STEM kind of areas. They don't go into social sciences or, philosophy, literature, history, politics, things like this. And because we don't think about the contribution towards ourselves as, previously education, the correlation between education and finance wasn't necessarily present. Whereas now there is a correlation between education and finance, even with the youth.
Yeah.
So you hear a young person say, "What's the point in going to university if I can't make money?" Whereas previously, education was about the transformation of self,
to be more cultured as well, to be able to have discussion.
100%.
Yeah, this I've spoken about this a lot, man. I mean, I've you can say lost people around me in that process, because I've actually encouraged people. What I said was openly in the bayan, right? I was like, look, if you want your kids to succeed, don't push your hidden agendas on them and your unconscious processes.
Yeah.
So you didn't, because we're migrant communities, we come with this idea that we're going to materialize, have great money, send wealth back wherever and our home is, and then also build little empires here. And because you didn't materialize that dream for yourself, now you push those expectations on your kids.
100%.
Then it becomes a case of, I don't care what you do, you have to earn money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the truth is that something like being a dentist is not really that common in the Asian community, but it became common knowledge that you can earn 100 grand a year. Now everyone's no, you have to be a dentist. Yeah, 100 grand a year. Yeah. Anything that comes up that earns money, they push their kids in that particular direction. Tomorrow now, if for example now, just a random example, a geography teacher were to earn 100 grand a year, they'd say, right, be a geography teacher. So it's all, and I met a couple of youngsters. I'm kind of focusing on this a little bit, but this is a big problem because I met a youngster, and his dad has forced him into taking options so he can do engineering, but his own choice is not in that. So then I asked him, like, do you study? He goes, not really. I don't like what I'm studying. I have to study it. Yeah. Rather, if you let someone pursue what they genuinely want and they excel at it, they'll excel and they'll actually get noticed for what they can do. And inshallah, rizq is in the hands of Allah.
I mean, I agree, but I also think the balance is key. And that's, I think, where we're lacking, like the parenting, because this goes back to parenting.
Absolutely.
And I think the bigger crisis we have is actually in parenting. The education is maybe an offshoot of that crisis. A lack of kind of awareness of how to parent. Parenting skills. Sometimes bringing parenting cultures from an environment where it does work to an environment where it doesn't work. Here a young person has a lot of freedom, intellectual freedom, to kind of think, investigate, speak for themselves, whereas in certain environments they don't have that, and so you can direct them, okay, do this and you'll be successful, whereas here they have so many options. For example, you just turn on the screen and you can see, okay, you can be this, you can be this, you can be this, you can be this, but at home you're being told, no, you're going to be that. And so that can cause problems. But also, I think with young people today, the issue is there's a fear that if you leave them to make their own decisions, they're going to make the wrong decisions. And sometimes it's a valid fear. And so I think we have to tackle that,
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, because this is the part which I've also struggled with as well, is that as parents, we need to make... What I thought is that the kind of sweet spot is that parents should definitely be encouraging their kids to study. Yeah. They should be encouraging their kids to do well. They should be encouraged... that reinforcement should come from home with love, affection, and so on. When it comes to, like, for example, now the processes that a person's going through, I'm telling my son to become a doctor. Why? Is it because I genuinely care about medicine and the upliftment of people? Or is it the fact that I can brag and say my son's a doctor? Yeah. Oh, my son earns 100 grand a year. So I agree that children need to be, I don't use the word push because push has got a head word, but they need to be gently encouraged, they need to be nurtured, the tarbiyah needs to be made, and they need to kind of be, navigated towards the correct decisions they can make. Yeah. But at the same time, I think parents also need to be cognizant of their own processes as well, and that goes to parenting, but also internal reflection as well. There needs to be an element of own muhasabah. Yeah. To know, why am I saying this to my kid? Why? Why am I forcing engineering? Why am I forcing law? Why am I forcing becoming a doctor? Why am I forcing, say, for example, now? Then hopefully, with the balance of that, the parenting as well as that self-reflection, I think some normality will be gained. But then again, the issue arises, do you just leave the youngsters to make decisions by themselves? And I agree with you, absolutely not. They need to be encouraged and pushed and so on. Yeah.
But I mean, this goes back to the point. So, what is education? Previously education, and I think generally, this was a universal concept. Yeah. The purpose behind education is to build the complete, human, to the best of that society or the teacher's capacity. So, how do you build the best of man is by equipping them with the principles that they need to make the correct decisions and that they will come across in situations in their lives. So and if you look at the, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but if you look at the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ, my view currently is that Islam is a very principle-based way of living. And the Prophet ﷺ, his instruction was principle-based. Why? Because principles, you can apply them in different contexts. But if you give clear-cut, instruction, do this.
Then it's a hukm, then it's mandatory.
And it's very difficult to navigate different circumstances because the context will look different. Whereas when you have a principle, when you have a principle-based approach, you can apply those principles into different scenarios and contexts. And so with young people today, the focus with parenting sometimes is very much do it this way, or think like this. There's no, principle-based instruction. And how do you develop principle-based instruction?
And can I also as well principle?
Yeah.
And also that there's no rational to explain that this is why I'm explaining to this.
Exactly,
There's no
the
it's like, this is I'm saying this.
Exactly.
I'm suggesting this because, and I'm not saying we have to answer to kids, but they want to know why.
Society rationalizes.
Right.
And this is, I think, where one of the areas where the we don't really consider philosophy, as a community, because every society operates based upon a philosophy, and the philosophy here is a rationalizing of everything. Whichever direction you go, there's always a rationalizing process that takes place. For example, the reductionist approach to things, or the materialistic approach to things, and we're seeing this in Aqidah as well. So where you have young Muslims struggling to believe in the unseen because there's no rationalizing property to the unseen. I can't rationalize it. I can't see the tangible results, etc., etc. So going back to your point now, pray. Why pray? What's the principle behind prayer? Why am I praying, etc.? It's not.
Or we refer as al-hikam, the wisdom,
So that's not there. Likewise, for example, if a person tells their child, pick up your litter, why? Why pick up litter? There's no kind of whereas if you teach the child, we are the khulafa of Allah on this earth, and we are instructed with taking care for the earth. They can apply that in all areas of life. Okay, I shouldn't litter. Why? Because Allah has given me responsibility to care for the earth. I then don't have to tell them, pick up your litter, do this, do that. They should be able to, pick these things up with their own kind of, intelligence. But at the same time, I think the other issue is sometimes it comes from the leadership, where we as religious leaders or educational leaders, we maybe assume our community is too capable, where we expect them to be able, to teach in a certain way, or to parent in a certain way, whereas the reality is, sheep need a shepherd. And our community sometimes they don't have that capacity.
I have to agree with that. And I also would say that for a lot of people, and I'm not having a bash of migrants, I'm not part of UKIP or nothing, you get me, but everyone came here for the sole purpose of earning money. Well, that's the majority.
Yeah.
And then you have a few obviously war-torn countries or fled, oppression. I get that as well, but the majority came for economic prosperity.
Yeah.
And in that process, what's happened is that neglect of kids has happened to a degree if you're only focused, just solely hyper-focused on money. Then, so it's about, why I'm agreeing with your statement, because I think that because they're focused so much purely on wealth, there's been a detachment between elders and youngsters. So parenting skills, understanding the culture of your kids, I think these things are super important. Hence, one of the things which I've done is I actually, being a counsellor myself, I giving a person 1 hour of my time, alhamdulillah, they definitely benefit from that time. But I'm more geared towards now providing parenting courses. Like I've got a few which alhamdulillah I've put together, and I hope may Allah put barakah in this. But one is like pre-marriage to before marriage. What are the things that we need to consider getting our youngsters married? What now? Preparations of the actual marriage itself, post-marriage, how to navigate issues with in-laws, tarbiyah of kids and upbringing of children. So I've got these kind of, there's about 5 courses so far which or 4 which alhamdulillah I've nailed out the nitty gritty, and I've kind of got some content. I'm just working on a 5th one. But I think for myself personally, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Sheep need a shepherd. Sheep need a shepherd. And this where ulama, leaders, du'at, I think they play a very, very heavy role.
But the issue though sometimes is that the shepherd doesn't understand his own sheep.
I was going to come to that.
So for example, let's say for example yourself, you come from half Pakistani, half English, and so Pakistan has a history of you have ulama that have delved into various fields, history, philosophy, theology, jurisprudence, language. You could tie their history back even to I don't know what you want to call it, but Persian history. Like there's a wealth there. Then English have a history, education, revival, all of these things coming from both. But then you have a person who comes to your, they're a part of your flock, and this person is their mother or father are nomads. they've come from the badia. You know, their exposure to knowledge is on a need to know basis.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're trying to impart upon this person who comes from a background where they're not used to the educational richness that you may be used to, generational. You know, it's generational. This person is the first one in their family perhaps to be exposed, and then we expect them to understand it to the same capacity. For example, if you look at the partisanship politics that we find within the Muslim communities, you know, I'm sure you get the views, but you know, Salafism, you know, Deobandism, traditionalism, whatever you want to call these. Sometimes we talk to the people expecting them to have the capacity to understand what we're saying, but the reality is they don't. There are some people, they can only see things in a black and white way. And so when you try to introduce them to the grey areas, they don't have the capacity to understand those grey areas. Yeah. That sounds harsh.
No, it's really true.
It's a reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala differentiates between the A'rab, you know, the Bedouins,
people
and the people of towns and villages and cities. The Prophet ﷺ, when he dealt with the Sahaba from Quraysh, and he dealt with the Sahaba that came from the nomadic areas, it was a different
approach. There was
Umar ibn Khattab, there were some that he would rationalize, you know, and there were some that he was stern. You know, there are certain people that unfortunately they don't, you know, different language for different people.
Different strokes for different folks.
Exactly. And so sometimes the problem is not the masses, the problem actually goes back to the leadership and a lack of competence in leading. One of the qualities of good leadership is to know how to lead. And to know how to lead, you cannot lead, you know, if you have camels, sheep, cows, chickens, you can't treat the camels like chickens and the cows like sheep.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's sometimes, like on the minbar, you know, we talk to people with the same language, we deal with people in the same way. And so even with parenting, you know, I think sometimes...
And if I can add, this is a hadith, أنزل الناس منازلهم.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's actually, it's prophetic as well.
Yeah,
come down to people's levels. Come down to people's levels.
Exactly. So I spent the last 2 minutes trying to, and the Prophet ﷺ said it, you know, أنزل الناس منازلهم, like in one sentence. And sometimes the issue is we expect from people too much. That's why we have infrastructure. You know, why some people, they say, well, what's the point in having green light, amber light and red light? You know, I'm not going to harm anyone. Yeah, you might not. But there are other people that don't think like you.
Yeah.
And, you know, speed cameras, why do we have to be regulated so much? Because there are people that will not give concern to the safety of others. You might. And so leadership is about, you know, putting in place the infrastructure and the necessary tools to regulate society. Are we doing that as a Muslim community? You know, previously we would. And I think this issue is also, you can see the impact of it in marriage, where you have some brothers, they're taking advantage of disadvantaged women.
Yeah, that's a big problem, man.
Yeah, and we you know, we kind of like expect people. We think too much of people's morality and ability to make the right decisions. And I know it sounds very bad because it sounds like I'm saying, like, look, don't trust people. But that's why the courts of law were there. If a woman is not doing what she should be doing, the man can go to the court. If a man's not doing what he's supposed to be, the woman can go to court. Likewise with parenting, you know, when the boy complained, the father complained to Umar about his son, and Umar asked him, and he said, what are my rights? You know, and he didn't give the boy any of.
So he didn't give him a good name. He didn't teach him anything.
Select a good mother. So Umar started to rebuke the man. You know, so it's like. And
then here she mentioned something really nice. He said that you disobeyed him before he had the chance to even disobey you. So
it's like, you know. So when it comes to parenting, sometimes I think what needs to be considered is putting infrastructure in place that makes it easy for people to parent, etc. But that's very difficult in a multicultural, very diverse community.
When the afkar and the thinking is so diverse, it's a bit of a challenge.
And then you're dealing with communities that come from, like you said, you have financial migrants. You also have you have migrants that are coming from trauma, from war. You know, so they're coming with their own kind of issues. You know, you have a father who doesn't know how to connect. I'm sure you've seen it. I've seen it so many times. They don't know. You can tell this person, you can talk to them, you can give them year-long courses, but is it really going to work? Because this is how they were raised, it's how their father was raised, it's the environment they've come from. it's like they are a gharib. They don't have the ability to kind of...
and obviously, for the sake of people who don't understand the word gharib here, because gharib in Urdu means someone who's poor, financially broke. So
stranger.
Gharib, like a stranger, wayfarer, someone who doesn't know, passing by. What you said is actually, spot on about the whole education thing. And I haven't lost hope in the older generation, but I've come to that conclusion as well, that some people are just so stuck in their ways. There's no point banging heads against walls.
Yeah.
So what I thought is that generally amongst the youngsters and the shabab that I brought up here, generally the culture is that we have a very similar culture.
Yeah.
Because obviously we're raised here, we've been to the schooling system here. So I'm now, my main focus is more on the shabab, on the kind of the second or third generations, because their sort of culture has somewhat shifted from what, say, our parents or forefathers particularly had. But that doesn't mean we're neglecting our elders. Of course, alhamdulillah, there's programs for them. Yeah. We encourage them to come to the masjid. We encourage them to be part of the community, and they'll always be our elders, But I'm now, when I'm thinking of these courses, for example, I've got the youngsters in mind. Yeah. I've got the sort of, and I'm tailor making everything into a British context.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it also becomes challenging, because if you do something contrary to the norm of those elders, you're seen to be different.
Yeah.
And then they also have a resistance, because anything which is different is uncertainty, and uncertainty leads to anxiety. And it's like, I don't know this guy. I don't know where this path is ending up.
Yeah.
So what I found about myself is that in the masjid, when I was the imam once upon a time, alhamdulillah, I had the privilege of serving my community for a number of years. I would talk about call them taboo topics, or topics which I think were needed, more social issues in our community. I would talk about domestic violence. I'll talk about drugs and alcohol from the minbar. Issues of pornography, adult stuff. And I would always I would say there's no point us shying away from a thing. We have to address it, because by simply just pretending it doesn't exist, it's not going to solve the problem.
It grows.
But alhamdulillah, I think a lot of youngsters, they appreciated that advice, but yet some of the elders, because their mind was that, imams don't talk about this stuff on the minbar, it's not appropriate. So it's about striking that fine balance. I thought I'd just share you that, my own personal thing. I've just kind of said to myself, look, the older people are not going to change in their ways. They're kind of set as they are. Alhamdulillah, we love them for the sake of Allah. But now when I'm focusing, building my courses, my ideas, I'm focusing it more on the youth. The youth and the sort of second or third generation who are in UK.
Yeah, and I think that's our responsibility.
Yeah.
But at the same time, but there are many elders that would be in agreement, and so it's because there are, I think, different backgrounds, different contexts. I think, for example, if you look at communities, you might find sometimes some Arab communities are more open-minded than other Arab communities. Some Asian communities might be more open-minded than other Asian communities, and I think it's about where they've come from. But at the same time, I think that balance also means that the elders being unsure to open up certain doors means taking heed of what they're saying as well, because we might not see some of the dangers ahead. And so having someone that slows us down sometimes is a positive. An example that comes to mind for myself is in previous generations, the idea of divorce was a taboo.
Yeah.
And it made people think 10, 15, 20, 30 times over before actually going through the divorce. Yeah. So that taboo was removed, and now we have people getting married on Friday,
and it's getting mad,
and divorced on a Monday. So it's like sometimes those taboos they do serve a purpose. So, but as you said, it's about, because unfortunately for us, society is moving at such a speed. We can't wait for the elders to jump on board with us.
I get that.
It's like, and that's not their fault, nor is it our fault. Society, yesterday, technology today becomes redundant, and so if you don't keep up and if you don't keep with the speed, then you're going to lose the youngers. The difference between someone born in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 90s probably there wasn't much of a difference, really. Technologies were pretty much the same. You had a TV, you had a wired phone. That's where it stopped. Computers changed everything. If you're born in the 90s and you're born in the 2000s, massive difference. The internet, Wi-Fi, smart devices. Now, for example, with cryptocurrencies and all of these things,
things have changed, man.
They're changing so fast. And so it's very easy.
And it's only going more mad.
AI now, for example, it's foreign to many of us. So it's if we don't keep up, then we definitely will lose. I mean, I've seen examples where Masjid committees didn't want to do youth work. They were reluctant to do any youth work. In fact, they shut down youth work, and stabbings and shootings took place outside their masjid. And when those shootings and stabbings took place, some of those committee members were on the streets shouting at the youth, for these things happening. But yet you were the ones preventing them from coming into the masjid. So, and that's the unfortunate reality. So it does need a bit of trailblazing. But there also has to be, I mean, perhaps the situation in America, serves as a reminder. You had those that.
What situation particularly? Sorry, when you mean this situation?
So, for example, you had Muslims that are, they got involved in politics on a certain side, and later on realized, okay, you know what, that might have been a mistake. And you had others that got involved on the other side. They said, no, maybe that was a mistake. So it's like, mistakes are going to happen. But sometimes having that person that slows you down is a positive, so it's like for us in the UK, things are much slower than America, for example, and I think that does serve us well sometimes, because we look and we say, okay, you know what, we don't want to go down that path, and so I think the balance is very important. Leadership has to have the wisdom of age, but the work has to have the vigor and the
of the shabab and
the youth.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. I think you said is something really profound. I mean, of course, we have to obviously include our elders because they're part of the community. To discard them would be poor leadership in itself. But why do you think there's a difference between the American culture and here then? What do you think? I've got my own idea of what I think contributing factor, one of the factors are, but I'm just interested in your take on it. Why do you think there's a big difference in the culture of the Muslims here and there?
I think it's probably representative of the difference between America and the UK itself, because
the culture of the people itself.
Yeah, definitely, because America is, the Americans ran away from the traditionalism of the British, and that itself can perhaps be seen in the da'wah. The da'wah in the UK is still a lot more traditional than the da'wah in America. And I think also we are now, perhaps, officially 7% of the population here.
I think it's a bit less, isn't it? I think it was at 4.1.
No, I think with the new statistics.
The new the 3.4 was the old one, or 6.5.
That was the old one. So, and I think that's officially. Unofficially, we're probably a bit more, I would assume, because of a lot of reverts, etc.
That's good. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and in America, I think the percentage is far less. And America is a massive, massive country. And America was built upon, if you want to call it liberalism. America was built upon liberalism, whereas the UK is a very traditional. And conservative place. Conservative, I don't mean politically conservative. I mean
as in in terms of values,
of its values and traditions.
I get that.
And
obviously, the church as the head of
exactly.
Well, I think it was the leading monarchy was always head of the church,
and they were always answerable to the church, even when it wasn't from the church. Although it may have been in the public only, but also. The relationship between Britain and India, I think that has had a major impact on the shape of da'wah here, because you have a lot of migrants that came over from the subcontinent, and they set up so many masajid, the Darul Ulum infrastructure, for example. I think a lot of credit is due to the Asian community for the Darul Ulum institutions and for the masajid, because without those, the da'wah wouldn't look the way it looks today.
I agree with you, and if you look at percentage-wise, and this is not to knock anyone in France, but Muslims, I think, are more Muslims in France than they are in the UK.
Exactly.
But alhamdulillah, wallahi, that's one of the things our forefathers did, man. And I'm talking about the forefathers of Muslims that came to the UK. They really focused on madrasa, the maktab, the traditional education system, and that wallahi is gold, man.
But that goes back to the point you were making earlier, the focus on education. Because they came over, but what was the main concern? We need to establish institutions of education here. What type of education? Islamic education. And I would say some of the students I've met from Darul Ulum, like, wow, they have a better grasp of Arabic than students that go abroad. The understanding of the Quran, you have students that graduate with the qira'at, you know, the ahadith. For the one that really wants to study and immerse himself in study here in the UK, they can do so in Darul Uloom. They don't have to leave. You know, we have a young brother from Lewisham. He went to Blackburn, came back, and he's speaking Arabic. You know, so a lot of credit is due to. But again, it goes back to the understanding of what's important. And I think that's one of the challenges that our modern Muslim community has. We don't understand the main concerns. For example, even amongst practicing circles, even amongst imams and du'at, I would say, you know, materialism has crept in.
It has, man. Big time it has.
Yeah. Whereas the forefathers, you can't set up an institution of education that produces students of knowledge. I won't say ulama, but I'll say students of knowledge.
Yeah, that's the best.
You cannot set up an institution like that without sacrificing dunya. It's not possible.
Do you know what? Someone mentioned something profound. We were sitting and gathering a couple of ulama, and he mentioned this statement. Inaudible, I'll translate. He said that there was a time ulama set up makatib, madaris, ma'hads, because there was the need of the community.
Yeah.
Now we are establishing maktab, madaris, and so on for our own needs.
Subhanallah. That's why I was exactly.
There's been a complete shift. It's like now, okay, I'm a graduate. What do I do?
Exactly.
I need
How
money.
do I make money?
Yeah. Let me set up a madrasa.
And you can apply that to, you know, unfortunately, you can apply that to Quran institutions, Arabic language institutions, da'wah projects.
I have to share this with this. Wallahi, when you mention Quran institutions, I don't want to name and shame, but there was this institution, right? What they were doing was they were getting like, this actually was in Pakistan, right? But one of the teachers happened. This stuff came out here. Long story cut short. I'm not going to mention too much because I'm not here to name and shame. But anyway, what happened? Just on that note, on how people have turned things purely for dunya, they set up an office. Now, obviously, mashallah, they had money. They set up an office, put a load of computer screens there. Now you have some poor qari, or some imam in a masjid who's earning peanuts. So they said to him, "Would you like to come and teach as a supplementary income?" They thought, "Wow, this is great." In the clause in the contract, if you try and steal one of our clients, astaghfirullah al-azim, if you try and steal one of our clients, your wife is issued 3 talaqs automatically.
Wow. I mean,
can you imagine how absurd that is? So can you imagine how detrimental the talaq is? Because you don't want to lose out on a bob or two, you actually want to put a clause like that to say if you try and contact our student outside for your own thing, I agree to this shart that my wife is maghallal, she becomes haram on me. Like, what the heck is that? And that's not the only player. I've seen other that one really took the mick.
Yeah, no, I mean
that really took the mick. I mean that you're really going low now, and you're deliberately going to those quote unquote poor mashayikh and ulama, imams of masjid, and said, look, come on, bismillah, here's the income.
But it goes back to the principles. Back to the principles. What's the purpose of knowledge? Knowledge is to rectify the self, tazkiyatul nafs and tarbiyatul aql. You know, so like rectification of the soul and nurturing of the mind. And so a person that's received real education is going to say to himself, I cannot do something like that, even if it, leave the validity and invalidity to the side. I'm not going to attempt to do something like that. Why? Because my education won't allow me. My principles won't allow me. Apply that to marriage, where you have a man going to a disadvantaged family somewhere in the world, marrying their daughter, and sending them money every now and again and saying it's halal nikah. What type of nikah is that? You're taking advantage of a disadvantaged family. They're not going to marry their daughter to you if they weren't in a state of poverty. So you're taking advantage. So the same thing. It's a materialism. Lack of real education, where you have now students of knowledge that have mastered Arabic, perhaps mastered the Quran, but they haven't mastered the nafs. And so
the tarbiyah side of things.
Tarbiyah. Whereas you look at the ulama of the past, the ulama that set up great institutions like Darul Uloom, the Islamic University of Medina, Mecca, Azhar, places like this, where the ulama, the books tell us you cannot join between knowledge and dunya. One or the other is going to have to what's the word?
You're gonna have to give way to
exactly. And here in the West, we're giving away to knowledge because we're chasing the dunya, because maybe the system forces us to. But at the same time, sometimes it's the lack of willing to live a certain way, to sacrifice for the sake of the community. I mean, the wives have a part to play in that as well, because you might have a student of knowledge that is willing to sacrifice, but the wife isn't. So it's the community. It's our understanding, and I mean, apply it across the board. So you have wealthy Muslims in the UK, and you have impoverished Muslims. A friend of mine went to Bangladesh after the recent floodings last year.
Yeah.
And I spoke to him and I said, "Oh, I would like to send some money." At the time, I didn't have much. I said, "But I don't have much." He said, £3 will feed an entire family for 1 week. And I was thinking, £3 for an entire week. He said, that's enough for us to buy food for an entire family for 1 week. And then think about it here. You have brothers that are, I was saying to a brother, like, £1,000 watch is expensive. He said £1,000. He said brothers are buying watches for £10,000.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. Like, if you buy one watch and you wear it for the rest of your life, I can understand the concept of an investment piece. But when brothers are buying multiple watches, trainers and shoes for hundreds of pounds, jackets and clothes, hundreds of pounds, and it's for style. It's not, our fathers, for example, maybe they purchased a pair of shoes, a few £100 for the function. They those shoes lasted, for years. Whereas now it's style. It's
keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah. Don't forget your portion of the dunya. It's like exactly like you said, keeping up with the Jones kind of thing. So it's like materialism has crept in, and then you have du'at that are we fall into it as well, because we've been conditioned. Desires in the West have been commodified, and so if your desires are not alive, businesses will go out of business. I need you to be desirous in order to make money. It's designed impoverished mentality, where your phone is not good enough, your clothing is not good enough, your car is not good enough. You can always upgrade. But if we were to stop that and we were to actually start spending our money on institutions, poor Muslims around the world, poor Muslims in the UK, poor non-Muslims in the UK, what would happen? It would completely change the way the world looks. But for us as Muslims, we don't have that kind of collective mindset. My money is my money. You're not having any of it. I don't want to share. I don't want to contribute as a community. Whereas if you look at our fathers, etc., the fathers you're talking about, they contributed to the masajid, they contributed to the madaris, they contributed to sometimes the pay of the imams, things like this. So it's a mindset. It's been said, I think Shaykh Zahir Mahmood, he said, we're willing to pay thousands for a minaret and peanuts for an imam. So he said, don't complain when you get a monkey.
Yeah, that's I heard him say that once.
Yeah.
He's spitting pure blatant fact, man. And that's the truth, innit? It's raw to hear, but it's the reality.
It's the reality. So it starts,
like, how did they take another? They basically one guy, right? He did like a food invitation for loads of people in the morning, and he called like ulama and other particular people. Anyway, so what happened? This is a committee member, so one guy of a committee. He called the imam of the masjid, but also some notable speakers. You get me? Who were happening to be in their local area. But that imam, he was struggling financially. He said to the committee members that, look, I don't want to leave this job because of the great fulfillment I get of giving back to the community, but wallahi, I'm struggling. Is it possible maybe we can... I'm not asking for loads of money. I'm saying, can you maybe just cover this so I can, I don't have to look for a secondary or tertiary income outside of my job, so I can stay focused. Yeah. Anyway, it just so happened that the breakfast invitation they made, right, or the food that they provided was... the amount of money which they spent, the guy was saying, the imam said, all I'm asking for is, the amount you're spending here, just a fraction of that. But then the guy, basically, the committee member, he started berating the imam, saying to the guest speaker, Sheikh, tell our imam sahab, make sabr. He's asking for a pay rise. And then he said, all I'm asking for is just, how much you spent on breakfast. Because just give me a portion of that, and then I won't need to look outside of my job. Yeah. I'd rather the committee member wants to give him a lesson on sabr. No, tell him to make sabr, tell him to make shukr, qana'a. Like this happened in London, not to mention where. One of the imams, he was really struggling because he just was a newlywed, right? And mashallah, he got married in quite a late age, about 28, 29. I don't want to mention too many details, just in case, you know what I mean? So anyway, cutting a story short, he phoned me up and he was really struggling because he could only see his wife once a week, newlywed, and he had to also travel there via kind of like what's it called, the underground.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of the time gone, this and that. So he said to me that, look, what I really want to do is get my missus to come. We both live together, and all I'm asking for, if they increase my wage by £300, I'll contribute the bigger chunk. That's all I need. The committee outrightly refused because they gave him a room within a masjid to sleep. So he said, look, I'm not asking for you to provide me an accommodation. All I'm asking for is if you just increase this much, I can afford maybe a small 1-bedroom place nearby. Me and my missus can stay. Then I won't even need to go home once a week because I'm here in the masjid. The committee member himself, he was saying, no, Maulana, you didn't become a Maulana, an alim and a sheikh for money and dunya. But it's quite ironic, my man's got 7 houses.
Yeah, but this is...
You get me? Committee member's got 7 houses and he's living in the lesson of sabr.
Yeah.
And subhanallah, man, it's a real double standard.
Yeah, it goes
frustrating to talk about this, but it's the truth.
It goes back to the lack of, like you said, education, the lack of appreciation.
Appreciation, definitely.
And understanding of what education actually is.
Yeah.
If you understand what education is and you appreciate education, then you will appreciate the educators. And also you'll look, like many masajid, they don't want to hire someone who, for example, you can have a person who's qualified as a counsellor, therapist, educator, or whatever else they need in this modern society, but they would rather bring someone that can simply lead salah, maybe can't speak the language, and pay him a minimal amount. Why? Because the understanding of what the masjid is, the importance of education, the value of it's not there. And it goes back to lack of competency in leadership. I mean, sometimes you have those that are leading and they shouldn't be leading at all. I wouldn't try to lead or to become a CEO of a company if I don't understand the arena that the company is working in. Yeah. But when you go to a masajid, you have individuals that have no understanding of deen, let alone dunya, and they don't have understanding of dunya. So put the two together, and it's a problem waiting to happen.
Yeah, it's a very negative combination of things. Yeah.
But I think, as you mentioned, focusing on the next generation or the current generation, things are changing.
They are, alhamdulillah. I think things are. I think people are becoming. There's a bit more of a renaissance is not the right word, but a bit more of a consciousness of the deen.
Yeah,
because, and that maybe stemmed from not inferiority complex, but an identity complex.
Yeah.
Who am I? What am I? And then the truth is that I think this is the make or break thing for a lot of shabab, right? Alhamdulillah, if you've had a good experience in madrasa, you've had those good experiences and attachments with deen. A part of your attachment has been a positive, mashallah, going there. You've had a sense of, call it peace, sukoon, whatever you want to call it. When you are in hard times, when you are in down times, you'll actually remember those good times.
100%.
And that would be a catalyst for you to go back because of the, alhamdulillah, your fond memories of it.
Yeah.
But if people associate and have negative images or views of the masjid, liyadu billah, was a place where I got shouted at. God forbid if someone ever got hit. I mean, alhamdulillah, it doesn't happen to my knowledge, but nevertheless, we have heard of stories. Then that would be the negative association someone builds up. So what my thing is, I think I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, is this point that if the educators can provide a good environment, and this is one of the things that wallahi keeps me teaching young kids, because I feel that, and my contribution to my community is this, that I can't make this big renaissance and change. But what we can do is, if we can educate those young children and impress their minds, they have a positive attachment to deen. Alhamdulillah, they will. If Allah forbid they go off on a wrong track, they will come back, inshallah, because nothing can replace deen.
Yeah,
nothing can replace
100%. And from an individual perspective, but also from a collective perspective, I read a very good book. I forget the author now, but the topic of the book was basically, he was discussing how the likes of Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah contributed towards the generation of Salahuddin Ayyubi, and he, his point was, Salahuddin Ayyubi wasn't plucked from a tree. There was a community that planted the seed and nurtured the tree as it grew, and he was the fruit. And so if we focus on the education today, it's going to have an impact on individuals, but it's also going to have an impact, for example, the situation in Palestine is currently taking place.
Allah Ta'ala make it easy.
I mean, but you have like individuals that are upset, want to do something, etc. But we also have to realize that change it's long term.
It's a long, gradual process,
exactly.
And istiqamah. You have to be willing to make those sacrifices as well.
Exactly.
And when push comes to shove, what am I giving preference to?
Exactly. Yeah. And so now I'm a wealthy Muslim, or I'm a person who has some association to the Masjid. What impact can I have that will affect Palestine? That will affect the situations of the Ummah. The impact I can have is by understanding the value of a person who can focus and dedicate their time to nurturing and educating the community. And so I need to make sure the environment is there for that person to do so. No teacher can teach properly except for very few, and they're constantly thinking about paying the bills. They're constantly doing,
they can't.
So
you can't do that.
So you have to provide them with a salary which is equivalent to the amount of work you want them to do. You have to provide them with the education so that they can actually educate. You have to provide them with the tools necessary for them to do their job. But if you're just getting someone to teach your children who hasn't actually had a proper education in Islam and in education themselves, then you're not going to get a positive result. It's like in any field, you have to have the look at the NHS. What's happening to the NHS? Why are nurses and doctors and fed up with the NHS? Because they're not being paid. The same can be.
And by the way, a consultant's wage starts at 90 grand or something. 95 grand.
Yeah.
And then if you're London waiting, I mean, one of my friends told me 120 grand is a normal consultant's wage. That's serious dough, man.
I mean, a CBT therapist starting salary is roughly £48,000 a year.
SubhanAllah.
So let's start with that. For example, if you're receiving £48,000 a year, that's a reasonable amount. I mean, you should be able to focus on your job.
100%, man. Amount. Yeah, of course.
But if you look at our masajid, there are cases where the masajid want to pay imams £14,000 a year. You're definitely not expecting that imam to do anything other than some salawat, and that impacts the society. And of course, it's not, because people. I do agree with the idea that you didn't get into the role of imama and teaching for the sake of dunya. Yes, but in order to have deen, you have to have dunya underneath it. You can't sit without a chair, and your dunya is your chair. You have to have something to feed your family and to look after your own kind of needs so that you can focus. And so the community need to understand this. The development of our teachers, our imams, our educators, for example, counselling, therapy, these things are positive. Educational management, all of these things. I think that the issue goes back to lack of competency of leadership. If the leaders are not fit, then the community is going to suffer.
I agree with that,
and that's what we're dealing with.
What would your advice be to young shabab who want to study the deen? Would you also advise them to get some sort of qualification on the side? What would you so they can basically manage the sort of the wealth and the money sort of side of things as well? What would your advice be to them?
I mean, I think maybe I'm not the best person to ask because like myself, I struggle with that question. Should a young person who goes to study the deen focus on other things, or because in order to successfully kind of study, you do need to have a clear mind where you're focusing only on your studies, but at the same time you also have to think about your future. So I think there's an element sometimes of tawakkul, where it's like Allah will take care of it. Yeah, but that's tawakkul. It's not tawakkul. So I think it's very difficult, but ultimately you need individuals that do have maybe borderline tawakkul, where it's like, I'm doing this for Allah. Allah will take care of my affairs. But I think it's more a community question. What do communities need to do to cater to young people that are going abroad to study? Because for many families today, if their bright young son or daughter comes home and says, I want to study the deen, they're gonna perhaps find within themselves the attitude that that's a waste of your intelligence.
I've heard that many times.
Exactly,
me.
It's not going to pay the bills and so on and so forth. That has to change. Previously the brightest of minds were the minds that were dedicated to the study of the deen. In fact, the ulama, many cases the Salaf would test their students to see if they had the intellectual capacity and the emotional capacity to study.
Yeah.
They wouldn't teach just anyone.
They would be the elite of society,
Exactly.
and that's how it's. And now, sadly, because of the free stipends you get and the free education, sadly, I mean, the case in Pakistan is such, and most of the cases in wider Asia as well, is that they generally attract those people who, in terms of financial ability, are the lowest of the low. It's a sad reality, but it's the truth, man.
Yeah, and so that's going to have an impact on
the end result, the output.
On the religion of the community. Yeah. If you have individuals that they're not bright, or they're not the brightest studying the deen, then they're not going to give a very bright contribution towards society.
Yeah.
And these conversations sometimes might sound harsh, but the reality is Allah has created some people with intelligence and others with a lack of intelligence. Just as Allah has created some people with physical strength and others with a lack of.
I agree with you.
If I'm looking to employ someone to build a house, I'm going to look for people that have the physical strength necessary to build that house. Likewise, if I'm looking for people to build the deen in my society, I'm going to look for people that have the strength necessary to build the deen. And it trickles down into the masajid, into the institutions of education. Sometimes it's black and white mentality that we see among certain groups. It comes from this. They're not very bright. Some people are not bright enough to see the
they haven't got the mental capacity to be able to even hold such.
There's no. I don't think there's any harm in mentioning some people are not bright enough to see the grey areas. Some people don't have the ability to drive. Allah creates us in different ways.
Yeah.
We don't all have to be intelligent to get to Jannah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to use what we have.
And the ta'ah, and obeying Allah, that's what will get us to Jannah.
And so the scholars and the teachers and the educators have to think about these things. If I have a student who cannot see past black and white, what's that going to do when I put him into his community? And if we don't think about these things, we're going to continue to have the problems that we have. It's like where you have the issues of marriage, where it's a textbook application. The conditions for marriage are there, so on and so forth. Therefore, it's halal. What about the ethical, components of marriage, relationship? How many marriage problems they stem from a brother saying, "Well, I give her rights; she's not giving me my rights," or the woman saying,
like a transactional business.
Exactly.
You do this, I do that.
Where's
like a tit for tat response, and that's not how marriages work.
Exactly. Where's the ethical the prophetic ethical framework, for example? There's a question that I've used an answer for various questions, which is, would the Prophet ﷺ do it? Anyone who has an issue and they ask themselves this question will generally kind of find the answer. For example, there are some individuals that are studied and that have studied and they learn it. They might say, well, you can cheat the system. You can lie about this or that because they're kuffar. Would the Prophet ﷺ do that?
No.
Some brothers will say, okay, you can send your wife to the local government, to the council, and your wife tells them, I'm at home by myself, but she's pregnant. Would the Prophet ﷺ allow that?
No, that's deception, man.
Of course, but would the Prophet ﷺ accept that his wife is taking money from a non-Muslim organization? No way.
No.
So, and I'm not talking about those that don't have the ability to earn. That's different.
Yeah, of course.
That's different.
I would empathize with people.
Yeah,
like
of course.
But it's the people who have the ability and then despite that they're lying.
Exactly.
And they're doing
so and they can justify it using the fiqh, using textbooks. I mean, even going into certain statements from within the Hanafi school, you can find certain ways of justifying these things. But if you ask yourself the question, would the Prophet ﷺ do this? No way. Why? Because it goes against the principles of Islamic application. Likewise in marriage. Would the Prophet ﷺ take advantage of a disadvantaged lady in an impoverished society? No, he wouldn't.
No.
His marriages were done for communal kind of
agreed.
Reason.
Yeah.
So it's like again, going back to the leadership issue, the ethical framework, not understanding what education is, all of these things. I think we're seeing the problem of this now in so many areas of our Muslim lives.
Yeah, may Allah make it easy, man. I mean, there's so many things which I really wanted to ask you, but I did say we'll keep it around about like an hour so we don't go on for too long. Yeah. What are your own future plans for the da'wah and the kind of general for yourself going forward? Because I know you've done your masters in CBT. You mentioned the person-centered as well, alhamdulillah. But where do you see yourself in the future with your work and da'wah and stuff like that?
I mean, it's a good question. Like I'm not the best of planners. You know, when it comes to planning ahead. So, أفوض أمري إلى الله.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, there's the dua that we say. You know, hopefully in the mornings and the evenings. You know, sometimes I lack in it myself, but we should be saying anyway. You know, ربي لا تكلني إلى نفسي طرفة عين. You know, oh Allah, don't turn me back to my own self, even for the moment of the blink of an eye. And that I kind of, you know, I don't know what's best for myself, and I ask that Allah keeps me in that which is best for my dunya and akhirah. You know, so I don't have an answer for that. I mean, da'wah, yes, I want to be involved on the ground in da'wah. Why? Because it's a blessing. You know, it's a favor from Allah. And if I ever found myself out of that, then I would assume it's due to my own you know, negligence and being out of Allah's favor. You know, so I hope that Allah keeps me involved in da'wah, teaching, imamah to some
How long have you been in Imam Lewisham for now?
Since 2017.
Okay, so since you graduated from Medina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but whilst I was studying, I was teaching and like, you know, doing some groundwork in East London until I graduated.
But you'd rather stay as an imam in the masjid if you can? Do you have plans to stay there? I mean, not that, you know, would you like to stay where you are in the capacity of serving the community in Lewisham?
Yeah, I don't see anything changing in the foreseeable future. As I said, I would like to be where is best for my akhirah and the akhirah of my family. So if ever a time comes where you know, it's not best for me to be in Lewisham for my akhirah, then I hope Allah takes me away. What would that look like? Where I'm not doing what I should be doing, because at the end of the day, imam has a responsibility.
Big time.
Yeah, so I don't want to be in a position where I'm going to be held accountable on Yawm al-Qiyamah. You know, that's something that many imams don't consider. You know, every salah you pray, you're responsible for the salah of the musalli.
Honestly, and this was the one thing that when I would step on the musalla, I would get nervous. I now understand anxiety and stuff like that. I would get anxiety over this one issue of leading salah.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, it would be that it happened once where I had a bit of an issue where it started off with like a cut, and then I would be constantly checking, is it still bleeding, and it become quite upset. I was quite like call it obsessive with it. Yeah, I would say that is the right word. And then that then led on to me constantly worrying about wudu. And then I did once, subhanallah, I led a salah, and I hadn't realised that I didn't have wudu, and that triggered from there on this constant thought of me reading. When I was reading, I'd be thinking, have I got wudu? Did I make wudu? What time did I make wudu? And why? Because the responsibility. I've got all this congregation on my shoulders.
Yeah. And then add to that lectures, add to that khutbahs, you know.
And also, I will say, right, and you probably can also attest, agree to this as well. What people see is you coming, like one brother, subhanallah, he actually said, ulama get paid a lot of money, you know. I'm like, okay, if you think so. He goes, well, look here, you come for Fajr, and I used to make sure Salah was never more than 10 minutes. People knew it was the orf. If he's leading Salah, you'll be done in 10 minutes. So then, like one of our imams, Allah reward him, right? One Fajr, man, like 26 minutes, 20 minutes, that's long, mashallah. I mean, the people know if you're going there, you're going to expect it.
Yeah.
Well, our other masjid here, the imam does 6 to 8 minutes, he's done. But I used to leave it as a sweet spot for 10, and I kept it as that. Once I went over 1 minute, and one person said, like, you took long in Salah. So you can imagine people are that used to it.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's cutting the story, going back to the thing, is he then said to me, you come in for Fajr, you know, you come this amount of time, you spend half an hour Fajr, and then you go. So 40 minutes there. Dhuhr, 40 minutes. I said this, mate. And he's referring to it as actual physical duty. So he said that you're praying 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. He goes, right, call that an hour. Then you have to stay for 10 minutes. And I'm like, what about the time, for example, that I'm meeting the people, dealing with the masail, people come from my house, talking to people. He was thinking that I get paid like £50 an hour or something because Salah is 10 minutes. But you get paid as an imam. That's a very small fraction of it. What about me being here from Fajr till Dhuhr? I was preparing, the lecture for the Friday. Yeah. I know I can't do it at home because I've got small kids.
Yeah, mashallah.
So one day I used to have to spend a whole morning preparing that. maybe even twice. Sometimes I'd meet people. Then there'd be like, for example, local da'wah activities, visitors coming, mashayikh coming. They all, I swear down, people don't realize it's a very, very taxing responsibility.
No, it definitely is. And
it takes a lot out of you, subhanAllah.
Yeah,
it's not all glamorous. Like people see the glamour side, oh, mashallah, this person's getting views or invited for a lecture. Nah, that's just a portion of it. It's like the iceberg. You only see the top. What's underneath, that's the stuff people don't really see. They don't see at all.
Yeah, if you're doing it properly.
That's the point, yeah. You're doing it properly.
And then add to that, if you're doing, marriage counselling at the masjid, if you're doing general kind of advice sessions, things like that. The relationships, being in public view is something which is not it's not easy. Where when you pray in a masjid and you're not the imam, you can enjoy it. But sometimes when you pray in a masjid as an imam, you don't have that enjoyment because you have that anxiety of responsibility and so on and so forth. But that's my point. So if you want to have imams that change society, then you have to give them the ability to focus only on that.
Free them from other responsibilities.
Exactly. And also educate them. Of course, there needs to be accountability. I'm not saying that pay imams and leave them. No, I'm saying you pay them, you hold them accountable, and you have infrastructure in place to develop them. We want if we want results and we want change in the Muslim community globally, locally, then we have to think about the infrastructure that we have and that we put in place during the anti-colonial period, where in Muslim lands they were fighting back against the colonialists. The Zawiyat played a major part.
Yeah, they did.
If you look at, for example, Umar al-Mukhtar, he was a product of
the Zawiya.
The Zawiya. Al-Khattabi, Abdul Karim al-Khattabi, Hassan al-Banna, all of these individuals, there was an infrastructure in place, a spiritual infrastructure of accountability, perhaps, but there was focus on the education, on the development, and so on and so forth. And so, as a community, we have to put that infrastructure in place. And then we'll see the results. There are certain parts of London, within one area, there are probably 10 masajid. But yet you will find in those areas high drug dealing rates, high drug use rates, prostitution, unfortunately,
sadly,
high rates of gun crime, knife crime. The acid attacks that were taking place a few years ago in London, a lot of them were taking place in Muslim areas where there are a lot of masajid. Why? Because the masajid are not doing their jobs. I've been to masajid when I'm not leading Jum'ah, and the khutbah is irrelevant to the people. I went to one Jum'ah, and the khutbah was about the Blackstone, and you yes, it's interesting. It's nice.
But
to
need
hear
that for a seerah study.
Look at your audience
for طلاب العلم.
Exactly. You've got so many major problems taking place.
Well, I'll tell you another. I've said this a couple of times before. May Allah forgive me, but this one really made my blood boil. Gaza was attacked, and the Imam Sahib's lecture on Friday was the fadila of miswak.
Yeah, so that exactly.
Now I'm not negating miswak. Astaghfirullah al-azim. Miswak is part of the sunnah. I get it.
Yeah.
But bro, Gaza has just been attacked here, and you're talking about using the miswak. Alhamdulillah, I'm all for the miswak. Alhamdulillah, we use it ourselves. The point is, look how irrelevant that is. People are coming to the masjid. They want to know what your response is. How do we kind of discuss this in our communities? But it's like kind of pushed it to the side, and that's what creates frustration. And then people have a lack of. They think the imam's incompetent.
100%, and also I would also add to that, where you have du'at, students of knowledge. Normally it's younger du'at and students of knowledge, maybe young-minded sometimes, but also the more popular ones sometimes can fall into it more easily. Getting into technical issues of aqidah.
Yeah, this is left for the ulama, man.
And it's for the ulama, but also even for selected ulama.
For those who have the knowledge of that particular field. Yeah.
You have like now the social issues that are going on in every single household. You mentioned some of them: pornography, addictions of various kinds. You have cultural issues, marriage breakdowns, the divorce rate in the Muslim community is skyrocketing, unemployment. There are so many issues that we can tackle, but instead you are going to waste, time talking about issues in aqidah or in fiqh that require an understanding of the Arabic language firstly and foremostly, to even grasp what these issues are about.
Yeah.
These are issues that the great ulama of the past couldn't resolve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have, for example, in Aqidah, ulama of the Ash'ara, ulama of the Maturidiyya, ulama of the Hanabila. They couldn't resolve the differences they had.
No, they
so
couldn't.
how is it possible that you're going to resolve these issues? You know, likewise in fiqh, you introducing people to complex issues in fiqh, and the person isn't connected to Allah. You know, they don't have iman. What did Aisha anha say? That if you know, halal and haram was the first thing to be revealed,
people they wouldn't have become Muslim.
They wouldn't have accepted it, or they would have left Islam. So it's like, now we're dealing with a society which is far worse than the society of the Sahaba.
Definitely.
You know, the commodification of desires, the materialism, you know, the
ease of access as well.
Ease of access, the Satanism, I would say, that has become mainstream with music, media, you know, fashion, all of these things. And we're gonna waste people's time and our own time talking about issues that are irrelevant. People need iman.
Yeah.
You know, they need iman.
Yeah,
so
this
again,
is fascinating. I completely agree with you. I've literally gone blue in the face arguing this.
Lack of competence.
I'm give you an example. This is how some people are thinking, right? I had a lecture based on marriage issues, and I generally shy away from the whole discussion of anything fiqh or aqidah related within a when I go to general masajid.
Yes.
And what I used to do, even when I was the imam of the masjid, I would never mention fiqh or from the minbar. I would always say, right, if you want to attend a fiqh class, I'm holding a fiqh class. And I also used to throw my hands up and say, look, I'm more of studied in this area. I don't know all the answers to the Hanabila and so on. This is my area of fiqh. This is my area of expertise. But anyway, going back to that video, underneath someone messaged me and they said, this was a great video, but I need to know, bro, are you a Salafi or not?
Yeah.
Are you following the people of Haqq? And I'm thinking, I just didn't even respond to that. Like, okay, let's just turn around and I say to you, I don't agree with Nasruddin Albani or someone, but I agree in this person, or I agree with this. You'll just cancel me immediately, which I'm not bothered by being cancelled by you. But we need to break out of this mentality. If you can find something Islamically to disagree with, let me know and I'll retract it. But you've agreed with everything. He goes, I agree with everything this brother said, but and then he said, oh, are you a this? Subhanallah. Just take what is good, and if bad, then just tell me to do one.
But again, I think it goes back to giving the masses too much, where we expect the masses to be able to make such decisions.
Yeah, and then you go back to your initial point, and they don't have the capacity to be able to even.
You have students of knowledge that can't comprehend the fact that Ahlul Sunnah is wider than their own small group that they've come from. So how is it possible the masses are gonna, and this is, if you have a teacher or a lecturer sitting on a table or a podium, whatever it is, and he's giving opinions in a particular issue, and
presenting it as very black and white as well, and that's what's happened. Polarized, no, it's this.
But for example, Ahmed said this, Abu Hanifa said this, Malik said this, Shafi'i said this, and the correct opinion is firstly Imam Ahmed, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, and secondly, you're putting yourself in front of the masses in a position to decide between the four imams. Who are you, and what is that doing to the masses? It's giving them the understanding that I can also take on this kind of approach. Apply that to Aqidah as well. You have a person who is a student of knowledge. Okay, you may follow a certain school of Aqidah, but you have giants who have differed on these issues, and now you're going to put yourself on a podium and decide, okay, this is the haqq for the people. And put yourself ahead of the likes of An-Nawawi or Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahumullah in front of the people. What's that going to do? It's going to lead to the people assuming they can also and say, the Salafi way is the haqq, the Maturidi way is the haqq, etc. And they completely disregard the fact that you have ulama and giants from different schools that had these opinions. So it's like a person, a doctor saying to the patient, okay, you have this medicine, which has, according to this school, is best for your condition, or this medicine, and the reasons behind this person's choice of this medicine is X, for this person Y, for that person Z. Which medicine would you prefer? How is he going to make a decision?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a buffet. Okay, yeah.
he needs to be told. He needs to be told, you need this medicine.
Yeah.
Take it. Likewise, indeed.
And that's why the ulama of their local area, they knew of the ahwal of the people.
Exactly.
And they would give those fatwa based on the urf of the people.
Exactly.
But now because obviously views going worldwide, global media, the own social media, the YouTube, like Google and
people
stuff.
teaching for their own ego.
Yeah. And the truth is that then those different opinions get urf is also customary things are taken into consideration in Islamic legal principles.
Yeah,
and Islamic legal
al-urf
rulings.
muhakkama, you know. So like, and not only that, but that's why you have the ulama, the muftis of the past were very strict in making sure that all of the fatawa in a land were based upon one school. You know, why? So that it doesn't cause confusion for the masses.
And they need to know the nafs of the people as well.
Exactly.
What is that saying? Who is it attributed to? مَنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفْ أَهْلَ زَمَانِهِ فَهُوَ جَاهِلٌ.
Subhanallah.
If you don't know the people of your era, then that means you're ignorant. You are an ignorant person.
And isn't that a condition of fatwa?
Absolutely.
Like, ma'rifatu hal al-mustafti.
Yeah.
To know the condition of the person asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now, for example, like, let's say I give a big talk on aqidah, on fiqh, and I have in the masjid those that have the capacity to grasp, the intricacies and the grey areas, and those that can only see things in black and white. And I might have inquisitive minds. I send people home with more questions than answers, and I can probably cause more damage than I am
then good. Absolutely.
Whereas the teacher, the murabbi, he's thinking more about how can I build, rather than show my intellectual prowess.
Yeah, I hear that.
And this is what's happening. Again, the lack of competency of leadership. So rather than building iman, rather than talking about the topics that are necessary, rather than tackling, the issues of our time, you're teaching them and you're introducing them to subjects that are absolutely irrelevant to them. And you're
creating more confusion. And sometimes even there's now ikhtilaf, hearts are disunited.
Exactly.
People are looking at others as deviants.
Exactly. And then you have these individuals going online and they're backbiting ulama and they're talking online, and who's gonna have the responsibility of that on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Yeah,
that's what I'm afraid of, honestly. Wallahi, it's not even a joke. Slandering, backbiting, these are serious things, man. Yeah. So people don't realise that one kalima, one statement can throw you far from to east and west, mate.
Exactly, and so it goes back to the the lack of competency of leadership, the lack of a principle-based approach.
Yeah.
Whereas for example, the ulama of the past, they had this approach. Like look at Darul Ulum. So when I speak to students of Darul Ulum, I've noticed that they're very reluctant to kind of take on new approaches. And that tells me that the culture was embedded, within them as students, and that's a positive. Why don't you see Darul Ulum graduates coming out with these outrageous statements online? Because of the tarbiyah. Sometimes it's problematic because there's a lack of willingness to to do new things when they need to be done. But the that as well, but the tarbiyah is there.
Conforming, taking guidance from elders.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very good. That's praiseworthy, man. Definitely.
Yeah. So that's come from the ulama of the past thinking about the future. Whereas today, for example, you have a student that comes from Islamic University of Medina and they've classified themselves as Shaykhul Islam. And same can be said about Mecca, about Azhar. You have a lot of good coming from those places as well. I'm not saying, but it's just talking about this point, where not taking into consideration the community, and it goes back to a lack of competency of leadership. Who's teaching those people? And you mentioned the point earlier where a person previously would teach for the community, but now they're teaching for their self,
for their own individual needs.
And sometimes this happens without financial gain. Why? Social media. Now people are catering to the audience because they want the views and the likes, rather than, and who controls the audience? The algorithms control the audience. Who controls the algorithms? I don't know. So what happens? Your da'wah becomes directed by the algorithms, and you need to follow the algorithms or the patterns in order to be. I put a video up, a small clip, and this is going to sound like a strange video to put. Something about innovation. So is it innovation to pray in the dark? Because Imam al-Ghazali spoke about it, and so on and so forth. The views that I got in a few hours, I didn't get anything like that before, and it's not. I don't get many views, but the point is the algorithms. It's potentially divisive material, and so
you have to keep a strong eye on your nafs not to deviate. Then
but then that's the
thing. Needs to happen. So because if you start doing it for wrong intents and purposes,
then the community's gone,
and there's no benefit in that.
You're leading the community away from what the community actually need. If doctors couldn't tell, if a doctor had to consider your feelings and what you feel and think when they were giving you a diagnosis, no one would be told that they're sick. You know, when you go to the doctor can't think about how you feel about what he's going to say to you. He has to tell you, you have this sickness. You know, you need to stop doing this and you need to start doing that. That's the role of the teacher and the imam.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, the imam's role is not to make people feel good. The imam's role is to tell them, you need to stop this for the sake of your akhirah. But if I start having to consider what people like in order to give them content, then no one's gonna be fixed. You know, I'm gonna end up destroying myself and destroying others.
Yeah.
You know, and the ulama spoke about it in the past. عالم للناس, you know, عالم لله وعالم للدنيا وعالم للناس, and you become an عالم للناس.
Yeah.
Digital nas, you know, digital people. So it's like all of these issues, they go back to the competency of leadership. Like, I think.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating point, man. And honestly, this has been a really wonderful discussion. I was saying initially we'll leave it to an hour. We're going to the hour and a half mark. But inshallah, I hope to think that we can meet again, because it's been a really wonderful discussion, man. There's many great points that we've spoken about. I cannot disagree with you on. I mean, there's no disagreements I've had in anything you've said. Education, leadership, these things are absolutely key to develop Muslims going forward. I think,
Yeah, 100%.
inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala make it easy for us, and may Allah reward you for taking out time for coming down. And then I look forward, obviously, to us meeting again, and hopefully, inshallah, we can. Hopefully more sooner rather than later. Inshallah. So obviously, I'd like to just finish off on this point, and if brothers have or sister, any viewers have benefited, make dua, mashallah, for Imam Ashraf and also the masjid where he's serving, and not only that, but for the wider community. Ahwal being faced towards Muslims at this moment, make dua for them as well. And inshallah, take some of the points that have been mentioned: education, leadership, developing yourself, tazkiyah. These are really important points. I can't stress this enough. Share this with someone who you think that may benefit, inshallah. As always, if there's anyone that wants to get in touch with anything, you can message me, email me, inshallah, and we'd like to respond to your comments, make dua. And until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.